listener production.
Hey, Chris Spear with you. Happy Monday and welcome to The Briefing. Scientology has been in the spotlight recently with its attempts to recruit young people on TikTok. So what does a former member of the church think about it all?
This isn't a haphazard machine. This is actually quite sophisticated, is based in research, and is based on what is the thing that's going to trigger somebody. What are the things that they are struggling with in their life that is going to lead a pathway to Scientology.
That chat with an ex-Scientologist who spent more than 2 decades deep inside the church is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Sasha Barbagat. It's Monday, the 1st of December.
Happy 1st of December, Chris, and to you listening, can you believe we are here already? Police have arrested 141 people and at least 121 of those have been charged after a major ocean protest at the Port of Newcastle in New South Wales. Activists protesting coal and fossil fuels in Australia took to the water in kayaks across the weekend, blocking 3 ships from entering the hub due to safety concerns.
We have successfully blockaded the world's largest coal port!
So that was from the group Rising Tide's Instagram page, where they have been celebrating the results of their protest so far.
Yesterday, we turned around a coal ship. It was forced to abort entry when swimmers, kayakers and people on a boat entered the channel. This morning, our friends at Greenpeace locked onto a coal ship out at sea at anchor and forced that coal ship to also abort entry into the world's largest coal port.
Yeah, they've put a lot of production behind that, Chris. That was a big video they posted to their social media pages with, all of the footage from the weekend. Now, they've labelled this event the People's Blockade with the goal of ending coal and gas projects and calling on the Albanese government to commit to the measure in a bid to slow climate change, but also to tax existing projects at 78%. That's another one of their big demands this weekend.
The action saw the Port Authority of New South Wales cancel all shipping movements from 1 o'clock yesterday. Arvo, a police operation is underway and is expected to last until at least 7 a.m. today. In a statement, New South Wales Police said it has a zero-tolerance approach to actions which threaten public safety and the safe passage of vessels. Now, the protest is set to continue until tomorrow, but it's not clear if activists will keep trying to block the ships, with today's schedule including morning yoga, silent meditation and workshops, Sash.
Yes, so looks like a much more peaceful Kumbaya day, but they might be getting out and about. We don't know. They're hardly going to alert the authorities and go, hey, just so you know, we're going out in our kayaks this morning, because they want to get out there. They want the element of surprise, I suppose. Look, it's worth noting a bit of context as well around protest laws in New South Wales. So there's been a big crackdown on this right around the country from state governments because it seemed to be specifically targeting climate protesters, so people who glue their hands to roads, who block major railway lines in protest against fossil fuels and soft climate action. The New South Wales government specifically brought in tougher laws on protesting in 2022, including up to 2 years jail time and fines of $22,000 for people who block ports, as well as railways and roads. And these laws are seen as specifically targeting climate protesters.
Overseas now, where the death toll from that horrific apartment blaze in Hong Kong has risen to 146 people. Authorities have been combing the buildings for remains since Friday, with 100 people still missing. There's been an outpouring of grief, sadness and anger in the wake of the tragedy, with locals gathering to leave flowers at a makeshift memorial outside the charred buildings.
The towers had been undergoing renovations at the time of the fire, with questions around the safety of materials being used, including bamboo scaffolding, nylon netting and polystyrene panels which were covering windows. While investigations are still in their early stages, authorities have arrested 8 people so far on possible charges including manslaughter and corruption. It is also believed that several fire alarms were faulty inside the buildings, which housed more than 4,500 people, many of them elderly.
Staying overseas into Israel, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has sought to end his 5-year corruption trial by asking for a pardon. It comes just weeks after Donald Trump sent an official letter to Israel's President Isaac Herzog in support of granting him one, which at the time Netanyahu thanked him for but said he wouldn't be pushing.
Now, a reminder, these are the charges of bribery, fraud and breach of trust he's been facing since 2019. They are charges he denies, but they've made him the first serving Israeli PM to actually stand trial on these. And among the allegations are that he had received gifts from powerful businessmen in exchange for favours and had promised better circulation of an Israeli newspaper in exchange for positive media coverage.
Now, he released a video shortly after announcing that he had put in the request for the pardon, saying that it's in the nation's interests. It needed to lower tensions and to promote the broad reconciliation our country so desperately needs. That's a quote there. He also added that this requirement for him to testify multiple times a week was an impossible demand. That's how he's framed it. And that he didn't want to miss a window to work on shared interests with the US. So essentially saying that all this time that he's spent in the witness dock, giving evidence or testifying, et cetera, is chewing up critical time he needs. One, as a leader during war, essentially, because that's what's going down there at the moment, and one as a leader who's wheeling and dealing with the US. So he's saying it's just chewing up all his time here. Now, look, there are still some official processes that need to go forward. This has to go through the Department of Justice over there. They'll give their official recommendations. Then the top lawyer to the president will look at it. They'll give their recommendations to the president, and then the president of Israel has to make a decision. It would be highly unusual for a presidential pardon to be given here, because where it has been given in the past is where there has been an admission of guilt, which is something that Netanyahu hasn't done.
A quick trigger warning for this story. It discusses suicide and self-harm. A landmark study has revealed Gen Z Aussies are attempting suicide and self-harming more than previous generations. So this troubling research is by the University of Melbourne, and it found 20% of people aged 16 to 25 have had suicidal thoughts, compared to 17% of all other age groups. 20% meantime had self-harmed, compared to 9% of other generations.
Data from Kids Helpline has also revealed today that younger children are feeling suicidal as well, with 3% of 11-year-olds calling the service in 2012 discussing it, compared to 15% in 2025. So what do experts think is behind this worrying trend? They say there's no single risk factor at play, but witnessing parental violence and being exposed to suicide were particularly strong predictors. Other issues for Gen Z include growing up in a time of rapid social change and digital connectivity, with climate change, economic uncertainty, and COVID having a massive impact on this generation's mental health.
Yeah, and experts are saying that early intervention is key here as a way to address these really worrying figures. Programs in schools and in communities are a great way, they say, to reach young people before this sort of thinking, this suicidal ideation can start. Now, if this story has brought up any issues for you, No Lifeline is there on 13 11 14, and the number for the Kids Helpline is 1800 55 1800.
And in case you missed it, which would have been incredibly hard because it was everywhere, but Albo became the first Prime Minister to get married while in office over the weekend. Yes.
Oh, yay. What a lovely story. I mean, after all the crap we see in politics, to just see something nice like a Prime Minister get married to his true love. Oh,
it's true love.
It makes you feel all warm and fuzzy.
Romantic Sasha Barber gets so off brand. Now look, the Prime Minister and his partner Jodie Hayden, who he proposed to on Valentine's Day last year, tied the knot at the lodge in Canberra on Saturday, and we've since learnt a bunch of bits and bobs about the wedding. Sash, what can you share with our good briefers this morning?
Okay, so we know that there were around 40 to 70 guests. So this is all, like, there's been no official, like, New Idea wasn't invited to photograph it. So we don't have the full story. We're just getting little dribbles. So 40 to 70 guests, and we know that Albo, Jodie, her parents, and the PM's son Nathan all gave speeches, which was really nice. In terms of which guests were there, we had Penny Wong, Richard Marles, Tony Burke, and Jim Chalmers among the well-heeled group who were invited. And my favourite detail is that Toto, which is obviously Albo's cavoodle, was the ring bearer.
Yes. I mean, my favourite detail, though, was the musical selection. So these are the ones that I really clung on to. So apparently after the ceremony, they walk back down the aisle to Stevie Wonder's Signed, Sealed, Delivered.
Perfect.
Great track.
Love it.
Their first dance was The Way You Look Tonight by Frank Sinatra.
Oh, beautiful.
And then allegedly, the dance floor was popping off to Beyonce's Crazy in Love.
Oh.
Which I was like, I didn't expect that for Albo and Jodie, but hey, Well done to them.
Well, it's a great wedding tune, I think. You can't really go wrong with Crazy in Love. And, of course, Albo jumped on the decks.
Yes, of course,
Hello.
the big headline of the day.
It was
jumped
him
on the
choosing
decks.
to spin that track, obviously, Chris. And look, they're going on a honeymoon from today as well. Only for the week. They'll be back on Friday and they're just kind of going around Australia. Where they go, who knows? Hopefully somewhere lovely. I'm going to put in a guess as they're going to go to Uluru and stay at one of those beautiful, there's an amazing resort right near Uluru. I reckon that's where they're going to go.
Well, yes, we will keep our eye very closely on that one, Sash. Now, look, that is it for our headlines for today. Coming up next is your deep dive where you actually speak to an ex-Scientologist on the back end of that big TikTok campaign that Scientology is running here in Australia to get younger people signing up to the church. Stick around, that deep dive is coming up for you next.
A little over a week ago, we brought you an episode of The Briefing revealing Scientology's newest tactic to recruit members in Australia, TikTok.
I've never seen them do this before, directly trying to appeal to young people through TikTok or through a social medium. And the reason they're doing it is because they're dying. They're dwindling out. This is desperation stakes.
That was journalist Brian Seymour there, who has spent years investigating the church both here and in the US. While Brian thought it was a blatant attempt at trying to lure in young, unsuspecting Aussies to join what he and many others have labelled a cult, he didn't think it would work. Someone who disagrees with him and thinks it's a huge cause for concern is a woman named Mirriam Francis. She was born into Scientology and spent 26 years as a member of the church in Australia, as well as the US and UK, even working in its marketing and promotions department in LA. Now a vocal critic of Scientology, Mirriam works in the harm reduction space, helping people escape high-control religions. And she's worried about the church's foray into recruiting on social media. Mirriam, welcome to The Briefing. You were in the church for 26 years. You were actually born into it. Why did you decide to leave and how hard was it to get out?
Really, I was experiencing severe mental, struggles. And even though I was born and raised in Scientology and I'd been told my whole life that this is where all the answers are and that you're not to look anywhere else, it just never worked for me. And I just eventually, what I was experiencing became so overwhelming that I needed to seek help elsewhere. And this didn't happen overnight. This was a gradual process, and there was a lot to untangle from, like the language and the fear especially. So in order for me to seek help, I had to first overcome that idea that, okay, Scientology maybe doesn't have the answers for me, and sort of have that kind of distance because they said that, my eternal spiritual freedom was tied up in this organization.
What was your understanding when you were in the church, the decision to leave? What did you understand would happen to you once you made that decision?
There's a couple of different stages because I was born and raised in the inner core of Scientology. That is to say that I signed a billion-year contract. And before I was born, my parents had signed a billion-year contract. So leaving in that way was in stages for me. So for example, I break that billion-year contract at the age of 17. And that had immediate consequences at separation from my family. But coming out to Australia on my own and, trying to survive and figure things out and all that, those were the immediate impacts. In terms of leaving Scientology, you can do that quietly and you can just walk away. The real turning point is when you take any kind of decisive action. So, for example, if you do seek counseling, if you end up having psychiatric treatment, for example, medication, those are very decisive things. The other thing is if you file a police report or if you file a civil case, those are things that have big consequences. And the other thing is speaking out publicly. So to make a public criticism or just publicly say, I'm not a Scientologist. So in that way, you can leave quietly for a period of time, but then if you take any of these specific actions, there will be consequences for you.
Since you've left, you've become one of the staunchest critics of the religion. Why did you decide to continue speaking out?
I think because it's not about me. It's about reducing the harm to people and to reduce suffering of people. That's not about me. That's a collective drive that I would hope that many other people would be wanting to put their energy towards. What we allow is what's going to continue. And so, there needs to be this connection between the people who lived it and people who can do something about it. And I think there's a lot of people in the public who really see these harms, and that's come from survivors coming forward and telling their stories. So there just needs to be so much more done to compel government to intervene and to act to reduce the suffering and harm, particularly to young people, which is the most heavily targeted demographic of Scientology.
You were actually working in the church's marketing division from the age of just 15. What did you learn while you were there about how it looks to recruit new members?
Yeah, I was in the promotion and marketing department for Scientology in Los Angeles in the year 2000. My role was editor of a magazine. And bear in mind, I didn't have, an education, and I was working 7 days a week for about $40. And I didn't get any particular training or anything like that. But one of the things that I did was I would go out and take surveys of local people, and then I would, document that and then send it up the lines to the international headquarters, to the marketing department there. And that's actually where my mother is based, and she's been working in that department for the last 40 years. There's no, it's not passive participation. You're always involved in some way or another. So as a kid as well, I was used as a tool to market to people, where we go and do public campaigns and whatever. So it was always something that, I knew about, was aware of. But what I learned in that marketing department was the targeting and the use of using specific trigger points and researching what are the things that make people reach for something. This isn't a haphazard machine. This is actually quite sophisticated, is based in research, and is based on what is the thing that's going to trigger somebody? What are the things that they are struggling with in their life that is going to lead a pathway to Scientology, and really establishing that through research. Now, of course, that was in about the year 2000, and marketing tools, research tools, of course, the internet has evolved since then. And so the tools that are available to them are highly advanced compared to what they were in 2000, which was in the early days of the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that leads me to why I've reached out to you to have this discussion, is that Scientology in Melbourne, and we know in around the world as well, but here in Australia, Scientology Melbourne has started posting videos to TikTok. What was your initial reaction to seeing or to hearing that they were doing that?
Yeah, my initial reaction was a sense of feeling alarmed and concern. And the reason for that is that we've got several factors here that are at play. So first of all, the introductory services are what's always been the kind of pull, the method of bringing people in. That's really what they're highlighting through TikTok, come and have a look. And we just, teach these basic things, and it's, it's largely common sense at that level. That's always been the way. So, are you struggling with relationships and communication? Again, these are based on the research trigger points. Are you experiencing depression? Do you have trouble overcoming past trauma? Those sorts of things. I think that a lot of people can relate and connect to those things, again, because it's been researched. So the introductory courses are designed around those key marketing strategies and research trigger points. Again, this is not actually different to any of the things that they have ever done. This has always been the way. The key difference here is that it's now on TikTok, which is a specific vehicle, which is targeting young people. We'll get into that in more detail. But using these introductory courses, which are common sense kind of information that you're not really going to be alarmed by. You're not going to see the red flags in that. But the real goal is to get you committed to it enough through that carrot that you are then going to be contributing to these larger services that they deliver.
Why is it your concern that they are using TikTok as a marketing tool specifically towards young people? What is the main concern for you as someone who has experienced being in Scientology as a young person? What are you worried about?
My concern is that they'll be reeled in under this sort of false pretense that they will become further committed to these experiences through the tightening of controls, through language, through eliminating other relationships which could intervene on their harm. And then in this progression of these mental health impacting techniques, which are actually incredibly violent psychologically. And I know this because I experienced them. And my concern is that once you're in that kind of cloistered system, there isn't anyone to intervene on your behalf. And not only that, but they do not allow for anyone to seek help through psychology or psychiatry. So you're also eliminating their ability to be helped by other methods. What this creates is this prolonged suffering that goes on unaddressed. And we've seen incredible amounts of psychological harm impacting people who have come through Scientology. Until about the age of 25, like, our brain is not fully developed. And actually, we rely more on our emotional responses to make decisions until about 25, give or take, depending on the individual, where we have more of a fully formed response developmentally in terms of our risk taking and decision making and all that sort of thing. This is the targeted demographic for groups that are looking to exploit people. Is they're going for that young age where they know that people are just that little bit more vulnerable. But if they can be sort of brought in at that young age, then you have the rest of their life to exploit them, the rest of their physical life to exploit them and to control their activities and to have everything directed towards that organization.
Look, to play devil's advocate, Scientology is a recognised religion in Australia, and we as Australians have a right to practice our religion freely. Is it fair that the church is copying all of this scrutiny just because it wants to post on TikTok?
Oh, it's absolutely fair. I think any organization, doesn't matter if they're titled a religion or not, if they're harming people, then that should be the thing that we're interested in. And these are vulnerable people. This subset of young people is an area where they're going to be harmed, because we know that age bracket are the cohort in Australia that are suffering the most from mental health impacts. And also they're incredibly vulnerable. And they also tend to use TikTok. So this culmination of all these factors is something that I think everyone should be concerned about.
Before we let you go, Mirriam, what are you hoping to achieve from speaking out?
Raising awareness. I would like to have impacts on reducing the harm particularly to young people because of their vulnerabilities. Yeah, I think that there's a lot that we need to do to make those changes, through education and awareness, so that we can empower people to make good choices for themselves as the way that they see it, because they have, as we get into adulthood, we have greater freedoms. But I would like for people to be informed. And so when they make those choices, they can make it in their own best interests. But while people are young, we do have a greater responsibility for protecting vulnerable people.
Well, Mirriam Francis, thank you so much for speaking to us on The Briefing, and thank you for sharing your story. I know it's not easy, so we do appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was former Scientologist and director of the Olive Leaf Network, Mirriam Francis, speaking with me there. And thank you for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That is it for now. Have you noticed Scientology popping up on your For You page on TikTok? We'd love to hear from you. Send us a message at The Briefing Podcast and we'll get your story. I'm Sasha Barbagat. Catch you next time.